Hello, everybody, and welcome to Goho from Home. This week, we're going to be talking about marketing, and I'm joined by the lovely Louis Connor and Claire Thwaites. I'm Stacey Karlsson. I'm the founder and managing director of Goho, and we're a PR marketing and events agency. Obviously not doing any at all live events at the moment. So we've been doing this series of virtual events as a way to keep communication going and to give all our users and followers access to some of the network that we have. It's kind of think of it as an opportunity to ask questions and get some information from people that you might not otherwise have access to. So we want it to be, quite quick and fast paced. We've got just 30 minutes. We've had so many questions through, so we're going to really struggle to get through them all as we do each week, actually, but we'll try our very best. We want it to be as interactive as possible. So please there's a chat box if you want to chat to one another or comment on anything that's being said. And there's a questions box which you can write in any questions that you've got for our guests or myself, I guess. At the end, we've got a poll. If you could just quickly fill that in for us, just so we can use that to shape the content of our future events and webinars. And so without further ado, I guess we'll go and let our guests introduce themselves. Claire, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Claire Thwaites. I'm the head of brand and engagement at Curie. Curie is a national charity that supports people who are at the end of their life. So we have hospices around the UK, we have nursing services around the UK, and we're a massive investor in research, and we have a helpline. And so it's been a really interesting and challenging time for Marie Curie, as we've kind of had to adapt an awful lot during the coronavirus, and we'll probably have to continue to do so.
Yeah. And Louis, welcome.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. So I'm Louis. I'm a business development director for Infectious Media. We are an independent digital media agency. We work with quite a range of clients, including retailers, finance brands, and also app-first businesses. So we've got quite a good range of experience there helping these brands through the current crisis from a digital marketing perspective.
Yeah, we've had lots of questions about that today as well, so I'm glad you're all on board. So you can answer most of those. And thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to join us. So let's crack on. We've got our pre-planned questions, obviously, that were on the invitation, and we're going to go through those first, and then we'll try and get through as many of the other questions as we can. So we're going to start off with obviously being in the current climate that we are, to talk about the elephant in the room, or that isn't in the room, I don't know. But when should you or shouldn't you mention COVID-19 in your communication strategy? Claire, do you want to start us off on that?
I think consumers can see businesses and organisations jumping on a bandwagon. They can see that from a mile off. So I think if you're going to talk about COVID, I think you have to have a real reason for doing it. You have to be authentic. You have to be helpful. You have to be doing it for a reason that really does kind of add value to the audience. I think the other thing to avoid is not being too generic. Don't kind of do the "we're all in this together" kind of messaging. I think it's very tempting to do that, but again, I don't think it resonates with audiences. I think they see it as slightly glib. So I think the other thing to kind of just recognise is that people are really, really anxious, and so I think if you do it slightly gratuitously, you're probably not actually helping. You're probably adding to that sort of sense of anxiety. So I think just in essence, just kind of do it with meaning. Do it because it's going to really help, or don't do it.
Yeah, this is something that came up last week, actually, the thing about we're not all in this together, because we are all in this together, but we're not all in the same boat, because there are people, I'm very lucky, and Louis was saying, actually, we've both got gardens. So last weekend we were out in the garden having barbecues, and, obviously not at our own houses. But there are people who don't have that sort of thing. So it's not kind of one size fits all, and it can become quite upsetting to some people, I guess, to say that. But have you got anything to add to that, Louis?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of two considerations here. I think, first of all, it's about brands thinking about at what stage of the crisis are we in. I think right at the start, it was quite relevant to be mentioning coronavirus-related, particularly terminology within your marketing and how you communicate to your customers. But I think particularly as we move out of lockdown very slowly, there's some really interesting research I read from Pinterest, which shows how people are now looking for kind of escapism and like looking towards the future. So perhaps doubling down on COVID-related messaging might actually, it's kind of waning now with consumers. So, but I think just like Claire said, it's about listening to your particular customers and what they might want. That can differ by vertical as well. So, for example, I think for banks, it's probably still quite relevant to be talking about their support to customers in relation to COVID, around things like accessing mortgage holidays or accessing interest-free overdrafts, things like that, probably still quite relevant. But perhaps if you're just an e-commerce brand selling clothing, probably your consumers just want to know how they can buy your product, right?
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that on Twitter, actually, because obviously we do a lot of social media stuff, and a lot of people have been saying, oh, I've had enough of these sort of Corona adverts, and I just want to see like a really nice motorbike or a really nice car or a nice place to go on holiday. I want to be thinking of the future now, not right now. So it's interesting because I'm still not sure that's still the way. I think if brands really go after that, it might be a bit like, whoa, that you're kind of ignoring what the actuality is.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Stacey. I think there is a place. I think people are also looking for distraction. They don't want to just think about coronavirus all the time, and they want to be distracted from their worries. So I think there is a place for providing that kind of relief and that enjoyment and that, and I don't think we should as brands worry about that. I think there's definitely a place for it. There's just as much need for that as there is for the sort of informative, practical stuff.
So would you say that companies should be changing their strategy that they had planned to navigate this new normal?
I think the whole positioning around new normal is quite interesting, right? Because I think it's become a bit of a buzzword in that somehow the entire world can be drastically different to what it was before. I think, yes, there will be changes, but I think a lot of the ways in which particularly consumers are spending and consumer demand will still be there once we're out of lockdown. Obviously, it will be slightly different. What I think has happened is the crisis has accelerated some of the trends that were happening before, particularly in the shift to digital channels. I think that's just been accelerated massively. So if I was a brand now, I'd be seriously doubling down on e-commerce strategy, probably. And conversations around digital transformation, I think, are way more relevant at this point in time.
Yeah. Because I've seen stuff like, Adidas, hasn't he, the guy who owns that, and people like that have really doubled down, like literally just it's gone massive, the e-commerce, and you're seeing a lot more stuff like digital, like virtual and digital changing rooms and stuff, so you can try the clothes on before which is mad, and that has actually been around for a little while. It's just brands hadn't been adopting it and like taking on that software, which I guess now they've kind of been pushed off the boat and got to do it if they're going to move forwards.
I can't say who the brand is, but we were speaking to a UK retailer the other day who typically see 80% of their sales coming from high street stores. So obviously when lockdown happened, they were suddenly faced with this prospect of 80% of their sales being wiped out. However, the shift from consumers buying online on their online channels has been so significant that they're now seeing the same level of sales as they would do normally from the high street. So it's just really interesting just how stark that shift has been to digital. And obviously for a brand like that who's used to kind of relying on the high street as a business going forward, focusing on e-commerce is even stronger, essentially.
Yeah. And Claire, what about from your perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think it's accelerated. Things that were probably already in the planning or in the works, and that's kind of been a good thing. We've had to do some things digitally that maybe we've been discussing for too long, and actually we've now done them, and that's brilliant. I think it's probably I think it's just a time to be it's a time when you can only really be tactical. You've got to look at what's going on around you. You've got to look at context. You've got to look at, what's going on, what the government's announcing, how people are feeling, how the lockdown is going to be lifted. That's going to bring a whole new range of worries for people. Can I go back to work? All those sorts of things. And I think you just have to bear those in mind and be able to kind of flex what you're doing to kind of accommodate that, or take advantage of it in a nice way. So I think it's about being really tactical. I think as Louis said, I don't think there is a new normal. I think it's just going to be a constantly changing sort of situation for a while to come yet. I guess the only thing that we can be fairly certain of, which we'll probably come on to, is the fact that there probably will be a recession. And that, that's something that you can start to, to a degree, start to think, how do you want to behave and plan for that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. With we're clearly going into an economic downturn, right? And that brings about its own particular complexities. And there are some lessons that I think brands can learn from marketing strategies through previous recessions. I was reading something the other day around how brands can start to promote things like little luxuries. And there's really interesting trends from other recessions, how sales of things like lipstick and coffees go up massively because people focus on those little luxuries. It's quite a nice kind of nuance there of like marketing strategy that you can take into what is going to be quite a big economic downturn.
Okay. You heard it here first.
There's no other way to
put it. Oh dear. Brilliant. Okay. Sorry, that made me laugh a bit. So we talked about authenticity and being real and empathetic and stuff, but what kind of, if we could break it down to a few steps for our audience, what steps would you recommend brands take to ensure their strategy is fit for purpose during this climate? So you've just talked about little luxuries. We've talked, how can we pull that together in a step-by-step guide for people?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
So I think with this one, part of it is about how can you work with your external partners? So you're a brand that's using an agency at the moment, or working with a digital agency, for example, leaning on them for particularly things like consumer insight and trends data to help you plan in the long term. I think reviewing short-term KPIs is massively important, because those KPIs are probably set 6 months ago when we didn't realize coronavirus was going to happen. But then again, being mindful that any kind of short-term KPI setting at the moment and the learning from that, you probably won't be able to apply those for the long term, just because it is so volatile at the moment and things are changing a lot of the time. I think also, particularly in our field, if you're talking about digital, the brands who seem to be faring a bit better are those who are really close to their customer data, or at least can own that customer data. So D2C type brands are doing particularly well. If you can get closer to your data through the kind of the right contracts you've got in place with your agencies, that's really going to benefit you as well. But in terms of the step-by-step, it's really difficult to say that there's a set step, if you like, to go through. It's massively dependent brand by brand.
Yeah. You got anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Louis, on a couple of those things. As you say, steps are going to be different for everybody. I think one of the things you've just got to keep looking at is the context you're working in and how flexible you might need to be. We've done some amazing things because we've been really reactive. We've had some incredible press coverage. We've had incredible social engagement, and that's just because we've been watching what's going on and listening to our audiences and responding to that. And so I think keeping flexible and keeping aware of what's going on. I think, as Louis said, going back to kind of KPIs, we've gone back to our strategic objectives. We haven't looked at them for about 3 months, but we looked at them again, and actually some things are kind of more of a focus on some of the things that were in that, and there's a less of a priority on some of those other things. So go back to those. I think will stand you in good stead for a few months anyway, maybe not for the long term. I think kind of really trying to get alongside your customers, try and understand where they'll be at, where they're at now, where they'll be, what they'll be feeling. I think that never ever does any harm at all. The better you know them, the kind of more responsive your brand's going to be, the better kind of aligned you'll be with them. And I think one of the things we've had to do, and I'm guessing a lot of brands might be in the same position, is we're having to relook at our brand proposition, because actually we've done some things that maybe were slightly beyond kind of our sphere of influence before. So, for example, we've launched a bereavement service, which we've never really, Marie Curie's never really dealt in bereavement, but we've done that because it was a plan and we thought it was more important to bring it forward during the coronavirus. So that's actually going to force us to relook at our brand proposition. And I guess a lot of organisations will have had to do, make changes during this time, and actually might be, good time to kind of think, okay, where does that leave the brand? What else can we do? How can it be relevant in this kind of in a sort of different setting, a new setting? So yeah, I'd say those are the things I would do, and there's some of the things we're doing.
Sorry, I have to keep flicking back. So just onto a different side of the marketing and communications then. We've got a question about what are some of the best practices that you would suggest as well building your employer brand during this time? Because obviously, as we all know, that is just as important as your brand that you want to communicate to consumers, and it does really feed in, especially, I mean, during this time, there's been so much reporting on how some companies have treated their staff. We've been having a discussion through the weeks actually about how that's going to impact their future business and how people choose who they do business with. So what comments and suggestions have you got about that? Louis, do you want to start?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. So I actually think this is a massive opportunity for a lot of employers at the moment. Whilst it might seem a bit counterintuitive because a lot of companies have stopped hiring at the moment, it's a really good opportunity to be shouting about how you're supporting your current employees. And to promote your brand off the back of that, because there's been a lot of research that shows that people remember how people and brands react in challenging times. And I think seen as a brand from an employment perspective who's treating your employees well at this time and offering additional support above and beyond, that should leave you in a really good position when things do return to normal. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for employers. Obviously, there are some decisions that are going to have to be taken, which are tough, but I think it's how you're communicating those to your staff and also externally is really important.
Yeah. And what about you, Claire? What do you think on that one?
Yeah, I would agree with all of those. I think it's the time. I think, we're all hearing about the brands that aren't behaving so well with their employees, and that will not kind of pan out well for them, I don't think. So I think it's about, obviously there's a real priority around people's physical well-being. Are they safe to go back to work? Are they safe at work? I think mental well-being is going to be huge. I don't know how many organisations have really put a priority on this, but this is really the time to kind of start to think about how can you support a really anxious workforce, I guess. Just one example that's kind of relevant to Marie Curie is that there's already about 500,000 people who are bereaved since lockdown. And we're probably going to end up with kind of 1 million people in that position. So that's 1 million people who are kind of going back to work, and actually recognising that that's going to be really traumatic for them, really traumatic. They haven't been able to grieve in the way they could. So, that's a big thing, I think. I think, as Louis said, I think it's about keeping the communication, transparent and as honest as you can. Keeping people connected with each other when they can't kind of see each other so much, and behaving, well, I guess. And we've had some great examples. We've had like Spa, who've used their staff to deliver PPE equipment for Marie Curie nurses. We've had Morrison's who've taken our furloughed retail staff and given them jobs in their stores. That's the way to do it. That is the way to do it. That's the way to behave. That's what people will remember.
Yeah.
After all this.
Yeah, actually, that we've just had a question actually, and we kind of just answered it, both of them really without knowing. So a question just came through live saying that they'd be interested to know the brands that have stood out to you both in terms of their approach over the lockdown so far. So you've just named a couple, Claire, but Louis, have you got any?
I think one brand that we've called out on a couple of presentations to clients is actually Tesco's. So they were really quick with modifying their advertising, particularly their TV advertising in response to coronavirus, and how they're adapting their supermarkets to enforce social distancing. And it was really quick how they managed to obviously turn that around, and it was purely focused on implementing the government guidelines. And I just thought the positioning of that was like spot on, and just how quickly they did that. In terms of other brands, I think there's a really nice example of like using creative from Guinness. I don't know if you've seen it, with the stay at home, and it's got like a sofa at the top instead of like the froth of a.
Oh yeah.
But it's just that was quite cool. Like creatively, that came out really quickly. But yeah, from a supportive side, I think what Tesco's are doing was pretty cool. Yeah.
Have you got any others, Claire, that you think have stood out?
I was impressed by Burberry making PPE equipment. That was incredible. And I was listening to something from Birdseye yesterday, who were saying, you know, they've really focused on being a reassuring brand during this time, and, you know, kind of recognizing that families are around the table, and actually tea time with the children with fish, and, you know, with fish fingers and peas and stuff is quite a relaxing moment, or it can be. And they were just kind of all kinds of things they'd done differently. They were talking about encouraging children how to grow peas, for example, which is kind of like, you know, it's not about selling fish fingers, but it is about kind of just adding a little bit of value and kind of understanding where your audience is at, I guess. So I thought that was just a nice little touch, really.
Yeah, one of our viewers has just said that she thought that time out becoming time in was really cool, and I thought that as well. But actually, I do go on that every day and look, because they give like 3 things that is like the listings for each day, which I go on it every day to see what I'm going to do differently. Because I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but virtual pub quizzes are really getting on my wick. I mean, like, it's starting to get, if people invite you to, you feel like you have to, because you don't want to be unfriendly or anything, but you're like, oh god, really? Like, I really enjoy phone calls now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got another question as well, which is a bit of advice really. If either of you could suggest some tactics for repairing any brand damage that has come about as results of decisions the company has had to make during COVID. So I guess that's probably off the back what we were talking about, the employer branding side of things a minute ago. Who wants to start on that one?
That's quite a tough one.
Yeah. You spoke first, Lou. Go for it.
What I was just going to add, though, and it kind of answers this question, I think just being transparent in communication is like really important, because people acknowledge that employers have to make some really tough decisions. Some businesses have to let thousands of people go, but it's how they communicate that to them. And if they're completely transparent and upfront about that, then the kind of damage is massively limited. I think the problems come around when these decisions are taken kind of without the employees being consulted, I guess, to an extent. How you can repair that, I don't know, that's a tough one. I think probably
you don't have to have an answer.
Yeah, no, just
we don't all know everything. What about you, Claire? Claire's got an answer.
I haven't got an answer. I think I would say you kind of got to hold your hands up if you can and say, actually, we didn't quite get that right, and that's probably just about the only thing. I don't think you try and dig yourself out of a hole. You just say, we didn't get that right, and you find some way of kind of making reparation, I guess. I mean, there's one big brand who I just think they've been. They seem to be kind of, every call they've made, they seem to have made the wrong call, and kind of think, wow, wait, joining up? Are you not talking to each other? What's going on here? It feels like every element's just not, kind of not making sense. Anyway, I think, just try and do the right thing. And if you don't do the right thing, kind of acknowledge it quickly.
Yeah, I definitely think honesty and openness are just, in our leadership seminar that we had a few weeks ago, that was kind of what they were saying, is just you've got to be really open and as transparent with people as you can be. And the problem we're in at the moment is as well, all the government guidance and everything changes literally every day. It's like, you can be furloughed from this date, now it's this date, now it's this day, now it's that long, now it's, and everybody I think does understand part of it, like everybody is anxious, but I think they also understand that we're all in, like, everyone's only getting this information day by day as well. So it's really hard to make the decisions, even harder than it would be if in a normal situation where you've had your data and it was kind of not changing literally day by day. But to be open and transparent and honest about that, and definitely to admit and say sorry, just to say sorry sometimes really goes a long way. We've got another one come in. So I do love a process we've got. Thanks, Suze. So we'd ask the panel if they would comment on any clear steps, because we were loving the steps as well today, aren't we, guys? Or strategies. Do you find a particular industry methodology is working well in these strange times? Claire, do you want to start on that one?
Sorry, the line went funny. I didn't quite hear the middle of what you said there, Stacey. I'm sorry.
So basically she's saying she loves processes and steps and strategies. So is there any industry methodology in particular that is working well in these strange times?
Crikey.
I know. We've got a tough bunch today, you lot.
I don't know. I can't say I can speak. I can't say I can speak for any industry. I mean, the industry I know quite well is the charity sector, and we're all having to do very similar things and probably follow very, very similar processes. We're all having to focus on bringing in income because we haven't got the normal ways of raising income anymore. We're all having to focus on trying to carry on supporting our beneficiaries. I don't think there's any kind of, unfortunately, anything that model kind of would work for maybe in other sectors. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really be incredibly helpful there. That's
all right. Yeah. Lou, have you got any?
Yeah, I mean, I can add that in terms of a set process, I don't think anyone's got a set process or methodology to help in this time, because it is just so volatile. I mean, something that we've done as a business is set up like a kind of COVID-19 task force, if you like, to collate all COVID related, not just government guidelines, but for our clients, consumer insight and trends. That's worked really well, just to have that kind of central resource to communicate that out to our clients. In terms of client strategies itself that we've seen, I think, again, it's a lot about process. So, whether that's setting up a task force or having a kind of regular cadence of meetings where you're addressing things like the financial impact, the marketing impact on your business as a result of the ongoing volatility. But again, I just don't think there's a set methodology that you can go to, unfortunately. It's just not as easy as that.
We always try and in somewhere where we used to both work, Louis, we always had the does it pass the private eye test, which is basically if you think that they would do a feature on it, don't do it. Yeah. So there you go. There's my piece of methodology for you all. So we've just got a couple of minutes. We've just got one more question come in. It says, do you have any tried and tested resources for gaining consumer insights for free, if preferable? I know some are better than others. Louis, you've talked a bit about that. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so I think this has been one of the big plus points of this current period is there's been a massive influx of kind of new resources out there, particularly for free. So ones that I've enjoyed are from the big consultancy. So for example, Boston Consulting Group have been doing a weekly consumer sentiment snapshot. So it's available on their website for free, but it's just, it's kind of not much text and loads of graphs around consumer sentiment and how that's changing by different verticals. So that's been super handy. Also, Google just this week have released I think it's just called Google Retail Trends, but you can look at real-time retail trends in the US, the UK, and Australia across different channels and categories. Again, that's a free resource. It's super interesting and useful from a marketing planning perspective as well. Yeah.
Cool. So Hayley's just said you cut off as you said it, but what I'll do is send an email around to everybody, and I'll put Louis's contact details in there as well. So if any of you want to pick his brains and follow up with him, then he has volunteered his time. So we'll send that to you afterwards. Claire, have you got anything to add to that? Because we've come to the end of our time, I'm afraid. So any closing remarks? No?
Nothing to that, no.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you both so much.
No problem.
And thank you everybody for joining us. If you could fill in the polls for us, that would be really helpful. As I said, I'll do a follow-up email so you can use some of that information and get in contact with Lou if you need to. Next week, we're doing a special leadership edition, and where we've got a chief executive from a local authority in New Zealand and a chief executive from a local authority in the UK, so we can, and they're both women as well, which is wicked. So join us for that. It's going to be at the time of 9 AM instead, because we're going across the world with it. And thank you two, Claire and Louis. Thank you so much for taking part. It was really helpful and really interesting.
No
we'll
worries.
have to definitely do another one. Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye.